Treasury Department estimates the group diverted over $100 million US to Hezbollah since 2020.
Mark Carney's response seems to be, "Don't worry, everybody. Everything is just fine." Canadian registered company has just been sanctioned by the US Treasury as part of a global network accused of financing Hezbollah. That designation effectively cuts it off from the global financial system. And worst, but not surprising part, is it sounds like the Canadian government had no idea. Let's take a look.
As Israel wages its war on Iran, it's also targeting the regime's main proxy. Hezbollah and its supporters mourn the death of Iran's former supreme leader. The militant group launched attacks against Israel to retaliate. Canada lists Hezbollah as a terrorist entity. As Global News first reported Monday, the U.S. Treasury Department sanctioned an alleged Hezbollah money laundering and fundraising network. The people and companies involved are active in, among other places, Lebanon, Syria, and Canada. The Treasury Department estimates the group diverted over $100 million US to Hezbollah since 2020.
So we have a Canadian company sitting here actively engaged in a global network to finance the terrorist organization Hezbollah, which is in the middle of the Middle East war right now, as everybody knows. Well, we wanted to take a bit of a deeper look, so we went looking for these documents, and we found them. Treasury sanctions global network diverting funds to benefit Hezbollah. Today, the U.S. Department of the Treasury Office of Foreign Assets Control, or OFAC, is designating a network of 16 individuals and entities led by Hezbollah financier and former public investment official Alaa Hassan Hamie. Alaa Hamie oversees a network of companies controlled through family members and close associates that launder and raise funds for Hezbollah's finance team. These individuals and companies located in Lebanon, Syria, Poland, Slovenia, Qatar, and Canada have been involved in numerous economic projects and are estimated to have enabled the diversion of over $100 million since 2020. The network represents a critical source of funding for Hezbollah, which continues to embrace violence despite calls to disarm. Quote, Iran is the head of the snake when it comes to global terrorism, and its proxies, such as Hezbollah, carry out Tehran's mission to sow chaos and destruction beyond its borders, end quote, said Secretary of the Treasury Scott Bessent. Quote, Hezbollah continues to divert funds that rightfully belong to the Lebanese people to finance its terrorist operations. This action targets key actors within its global financial network that sustain its militant activities. End quote. Today's action is being taken pursuant to the Counterterrorism Authority Executive Order 13224 as amended. The U.S. Department of State designated Hezbollah as a specially designated global terrorist pursuant to Executive Order 13224 on October 31st, 2001, and previously as a foreign terrorist organization pursuant to Section 219 of the Immigration and Nationality Act on October 8th, 1997. So we're going to skip halfway down through the first paragraph here. Qatar-based Raouf Fadel is involved in numerous projects with Alaa Hamie and the Hezbollah finance team, including with Hezbollah finance team members Mohammed al-Bazal and Rashid al-Bazal. Fadel is the co-founder and chief executive officer of Hezbollah associated 7 Cs for International Trading and Logistics, which is the Canadian branch of Alaa Hamie's similarly named Lebanese companies. So this is the actual OFAC document that we found associated with this. This is the specific company in Canada. So you can see the entity name is there, the business number, registration number, secondary sanctions, and all of this. And you can see the country is in Canada, and it's in British Columbia, of all places. So this is a little concerning, isn't it? Well, let's hope our government knows that this is actually going on.
Corporate records show it is still active. Global News contacted a co-founder, Raouf Fadel. He declined to comment before speaking to his lawyer. Two others, Mohamed Webe and Ahmed Webe, could not be reached for comment. All three are listed as Qatar residents. BC's finance ministry said any steps from the province would be informed by engagement with federal partners. Global News asked the public safety minister why the company is not sanctioned in Canada and why it's operating in the country.
It's a law enforcement agency that enforces the law, so between the RCMP and CSIS, they're reviewing the situation and then they will have more to say.
Global News also asked why Canadians only learned about the Vancouver company through the U.S. government. Gary Anandasangari said the ministry often doesn't discuss matters under investigation.
There are a range of things that our law enforcement do, including on national security matters, and this is one of those matters where they will have more to say to you.
The RCMP, CSIS, and Global Affairs Canada did not respond to requests for comment.
If you caught it, this organization has not been sanctioned in Canada. It's only been sanctioned by the United States. And when asked why we weren't told about it, the minister's response is, well, you know, we work on things. We work on things behind the scenes, and doesn't mean that things aren't happening. Well, here's the problem with that. See, when you sanction a company, like when the US is sanctioning them now, what that does is it effectively cuts them off from the United States banking and financial system. And then what that does is it puts any companies at risk that do business with that sanctioned company. So what ends up happening is all of the United States banks freeze the assets of any of the companies that are actually sanctioned. So that means the people that are trying to get their money in the accounts of those American banks, they can't do that. Then what happens is, because the Canadian banks are connected to the US banks, and the Canadian banks are maybe where this company is actually doing business, they don't have to because they're outside of the US, but they usually end up freezing their accounts as well. So the question is why hasn't the Canadian government sanctioned this organization? The only reason that I can think of is they didn't know. They didn't know that a company operating on their soil was part of a $100 million global terrorist ring to finance Hezbollah. Well done, Mark Carney, and well done, Gary Anandasangari. And the other thing that was interesting about this story is that all three of the owners of this company are allegedly living in Qatar, or Qatar, depending on how you want to pronounce it. And I found that interesting because didn't Mark Carney just go over to Qatar and sign a deal, a big trade deal? Remember how he said that, oh, I spoke about all these human rights issues in China. And then when asked through an order paper question, they actually turned around and said, oh, well, you know, he actually didn't. He didn't proactively bring anything up at all. Well, ladies and gentlemen, the government now says that was a mistake. That was a boo-boo. So Mark Carney allegedly did bring it up in the in China. I don't know how you get that wrong, personally. I really don't. How do you get that wrong? That's not a I misunderstood. That's a complete reversal of a position. But that's what they're trying to say now, that was a mistake, and we've corrected the order paper saying he did in fact bring it up. And some Canadians are saying, well, you know, that's consistent with what he said when he was asked about it by the press. Yeah, I'm sure it was consistent with that. But there's also human rights concerns in Qatar. And now we have people that live there that own a Canadian company that is part of a global Hezbollah terrorist ring. Hooray! How is that, you know, collaboration with law enforcement working out, Mark Carney? How's it working out? Because when we have companies that are in Canada and we have people that are able to come into Canada, register companies, and come and go as they please, and they're part of global terrorism rings, maybe that's a problem. But it's no wonder it's a problem, because as we said on our previous video today, our immigration system is a complete dumpster fire. It is a joke. And the fact that we're letting in these people that are able to operate this way, and that we have reports of up to 700 IRGC officials in Canada, Gary trying to make everyone feel better and saying, well, we've deported one. Wow. Well, I guess that's a start. But this is where we're at, folks. This is where we're at. $100 million global terrorist ring in Vancouver, BC. And I imagine everybody watching this is saying, yeah, although that's disturbing, I'm not surprised in the least. What is interesting, though, is that all of these stories are kind of snowballing at the same time out of Mark Carney's Liberal cabinet, where you have the immigration minister shown to be a complete disaster. You have this information coming out about him not bringing up human rights issues when he was in China, despite the fact that he said that to the media, and then trying to correct that. You have the fact that a senior official was saying that, oh, well, you know, everything's fine with India now. There's no foreign interference at all. And then Mark Carney and Anita Anand say, well, you know, we don't know if that's the case. We wouldn't have said that. And then the RCMP commissioner comes out and says, oh, well, you know, we have no evidence about that. So there's all that questions about that. Mark Carney's complete flip-flopping on Iran, back and forth and back and forth. And now you have this coming out, and this shows even more incompetence by the public safety minister, and that he obviously didn't know. Seems that CSIS didn't know. Seems that RCMP didn't know. So it's just making his government look more and more incompetent by the minute. And Mark Carney's response seems to be, don't worry, everybody. Everything is just fine.